Welcome to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek, where we take a look into the world of manufacturing with a focus on stories and trends that lead to better solutions. Our guests share tips and outcomes that are going to help improve your productivity. I'm your host, Sam Russum, and today we're joined by Kevin McClusky, Co-Director of Sales Engineering at Inductive Automation. Kevin, it's super great to have you here. I think you know I'm a big fan of Ignition and really like what you all are doing over there at Inductive. Do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself and Inductive Automation to our audience?
Sure thing, Sam. It's great to be here. Thank you for having us on. I really, we've known each other for a long time at this point, and we have a close relationship with Grantek too. It's great to be here. So I'm Kevin McClusky. I'm Co-Director of Sales Engineering, as you said. I've been with the company for a little bit over a decade, and it's been a fun ride. Before that, I was working for a control systems integrator downtown Sacramento, and worked with a lot of wineries, a lot of food and bev processors. And then since coming to Inductive Automation, it's been it worked with just all sorts of different customers across all sorts of different industries. So it's been hundreds of customers, if not going into the thousands at this point, that I've worked with personally. And, it's been really rewarding. It's fun, and it's good to be here talking to you today.
Cool, that's great. And do you want to talk a little bit more about Inductive Automation and what you all do?
Sure, yeah. So for the listeners who don't know who we are, Inductive Automation is a software company. We create the Ignition platform, and that is the Scada, HMI, MES, IIoT platform that is available for anybody to purchase from us, download a free copy, grab, play around with. And we've put a lot of love and care and lots of work into creating what we think is the best platform out there for all of the things that we're trying to do with it. And so we have a lot of customers who would tell us the same thing. It's not just us that think that. So we've been really successful so far, and we're really happy to support customers who are engaging with us and moving forward. And a number of folks have made that switch over to Inductive from other platforms or installed it right alongside their existing platforms. And so, yeah, I'm surprised if most listeners hadn't heard of us but if you know, our website's great. We're happy to talk to folks as well.
Yeah, that's great.
For listeners who don't know who Inductive Automation is, Inductive Automation, we're a software company, and we create a platform called Ignition. That platform's for IIoT, Scada, MES, and HMI. And if you've used any of the traditional vendors in those spaces from 10 or 15 years ago, there's a good chance that you already know who we are, and you've already seen us coming up inside the market. At this point, we're one of the big players. So we're in over 100 countries. We have tens of thousands of installations around the world. And it's been a really fun process getting where we are from where we were. I've been with the company, as I mentioned, for a little over a decade. So I've seen the growth and have been part of influencing the direction that we go with that. We have a fantastic team who all is, brilliant engineers and business folks. And we've made some really good decisions along the way. And we're hoping that we'll continue making those and continue delighting customers going forward.
Yeah, that's all great. Again, huge fan of what you all are doing, and really appreciate you coming on the podcast to give your perspective. We have a lot of systems integrators and some of my coworkers on here. We have some end customers and manufacturers, and having that kind of the software vendor side, the people that are really creating a lot of the things to deliver to this market is really great for us to have too. So with that in mind, right, with you kind of being on that software development side of things, what does Industry 4.0 mean to you and people on the Inductive team?
That is a great question. If you go back maybe 3 years, we were asking ourselves that same question. What does Industry 4.0 mean? Because, when it comes down to it, we've had a platform for the last decade that would connect all of these different things together and present all of that data in a unified way. And so we had the question, what's the difference between what a Scada system is and what Industry 4.0 actually is? And to me, I think everybody's going to have a slightly different answer here. But to me, if you're talking about a full Industry 4.0 type of transformation that you might be doing, it's really everything from device connectivity up through the communication layer, up through the presentation layer, and being able to unify all of that, being able to present data in a standardized way. And then also one of the really important pieces to inductive automation, and to me personally too, is the openness of the system, being able to have open standard technologies that folks are able to connect with, standards that are maintained by standards bodies in a way that it's not going to have any vendor lock-in, and you're going to really democratize the data, democratize the access to these systems. And so we, Inductive Automation, have standardized on MQTT and SparkPlug-B as the standards for that data transfer and that communication piece, that middleware. Although we do support as well OBC UA and other point-to-point protocols. We have support for all sorts of different protocols, but if we're taking a look at that communication layer, that's really a true IIoT or Industry 4.0 type of communication layer. That's the direction we've gone with that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and you're absolutely right that yes, we've been asking this question as our opening question throughout the podcast, and we've gotten a whole bunch of different answers. But a lot of the themes are the same, right? A lot of it is around this implementation of modern technology, very data centric, a lot of data democratization. But I do think it's really interesting how you're bringing up standards specifically. I mean, I do think that is one of the maybe less sexy things about Industry 4.0, but is very important, right? That we're all kind of doing this in generally the same way, where it is important to establish that consistency and standards, whether it be a protocol like an MQTT or kind of a bigger guidance like something like an ISA or ISO standard. You're right. And I think that it's a good reminder that a lot of that material is out there and can be leveraged by people. You don't need to reinvent the wheel from scratch. There's a lot of good information out there that you can be building from, and things, accepted standards that you could be using to jumpstart your journey.
All you've really done is moved from one vendor lock-in to another, and in another 5 or 10 years, whatever the upgrade cycle is, you're going to have to move again. So it doesn't really get you true transformation if you're going from one closed standard to another closed standard. I think that open standards are one of the most important things that's happened inside the industrial space. It's happened on the IT space a long time ago. And I think that the industrial space is really catching up with that these days. And if you're not moving to a platform with open standards and with open standard support, you should really reevaluate your priority and figure out if that's the way that you want to go, or if you want to explore some other options. There are a lot of platforms out there now that do support open standards. It's I think does.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so in addition to the adoption and embracing open standards, what are the other ways that, as you all are working on the Ignition platform, that you're really thinking about realizing digitalization for your customers, and what other things are you building into the platform to make sure that it's a really great tool for digital transformation?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of ways. So we have inside Ignition, we've got a full IIoT solution, really. And I mentioned MQTT and SparkPlug earlier. Those are a couple of standards that we've built in. There are a lot of modules that Ignition has. Ignition's built from modules. And if you're not familiar with Ignition, you could almost think of it like apps on your phone. Basically, these modules provide additional tools in your tool set, and they plug into the platform, and they all extend the functionality. And of course, the Ignition platform can scale out horizontally as well as vertically. And so you can have multiple installations across enterprises. We have a much it's really a huge a huge market share at this point on the enterprise side. Go back a few years and we were getting into that. And at this point, we just have so many customers who are using us for across the board installations that are running their whole enterprises that are across multiple different facilities and locations, or tens of thousands of oil wells that are out wherever they happen to be, or it could be power distribution, or it could be manufacturing or automotive. There's a lot in food and bev. And so I think that the technologies that are really helping enable a lot of that are those pieces that are doing the communication. But then there's also the importance of being able to garner insights from that data, being able to take a look at the data that is sent over these systems and being able to get information at a glance, dashboards, visualization, and there's sometimes I'll refer to something that's the Gartner hype cycle. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but it's talking about certain technologies where it has several different points in this hype cycle, and basically it's a it starts low, and then there's some sort of a technology trigger, and then it goes high, and there's this peak, and it's the peak of inflated expectations. And then after that, it drops over to the trough of disillusionment. And so I think a lot of these Industry 4.0 technologies have started. They hit this peak. I think they've moved through the trough of disillusionment in most cases, and then they're moving over to this slope of enlightenment and plateau of productivity. And so if you get a chance, take a look at that graph. I think that we're through a lot of the hype, and we're actually seeing real differences that companies are getting out of technologies at this point, and out of platforms that can bring that data together in a single central place and provide those insights that people are looking for. I've opened standards before, and I'll mention it again. One of the nice things that Ignition makes available for using it as an IoT solution is that we don't force folks to use just the Ignition tools if you want to use other things that are outside of Ignition. So if you're using Ignition for dashboards, you can use Ignition's built-in machine learning tools if you want to. But if you've hired a data scientist that is out of school, there's a good chance that they're going to know TensorFlow, and they're going to know scikit-learn, and they're going to know some of these other Python libraries, or maybe R, and they're going to want to use these tools that they understand and that they've spent their whole school career going through and learning and getting value out of and bringing value to your organization. We take an approach of allowing folks to use these best of breed technologies along with Ignition, and then just pipe that data. So you can pipe that through to the dashboards that Ignition's really good at showing these dashboards. And rather than folks needing to learn the machine learning tools inside Ignition, they can use what they know best and then just connect that up and present that information there. Do closed loop controls, send that information back to a central location, or back to even have process variables that are making recommendations for tuning those processes. If you change a set point by 0.2, you're going to get another 1% of productivity if that's what this machine learning algorithm is recommending to you. And that information can just be piped right back through. You can run these centrally and then send them down to all the different locations. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that we've seen folks doing and getting real world improvements from using this Industry 4.0 type of technology and making that transformation for the customers.
Yeah, and it sounds like one of the things that's really enabling that in your experience is that open philosophy, right? That idea that, Ignition and certain software platforms have their expertise and they do a certain thing really well, but the importance of being open and then being willing to exchange that information with other systems that do their thing very well. So that you have a whole bunch of kind of things that are all best in class, all working together to deliver an outcome. So I think that's a great concept and a great And that's a true shift that maybe not a lot of people realize, right? Kind of moving away from these more closed proprietary systems and opening things up a little bit more is quite a change, I think, in manufacturing, but one with a lot of gains. And I do think it's a big, important part of Industry 4.0. So with things like that in mind, kind of around the standard. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's an important philosophical piece for us as an organization. But frankly, it's only a percentage of our customers who actually use that. Ignition has a ton of built-in tools that are really useful and really productive, and folks can stay inside the Ignition ecosystem entirely if they want to. I think that part of the value of that openness is for organizations that are really pushing the envelope, that are going out there, that are already pulling tools in that they're using in their organization. They want to connect all of those. I think that those organizations are finding value in it. And then I think other organizations, folks who are just using the built-in Ignition tools, which is a very rich feature set that Ignition has, those folks often just appreciate the openness in that they know that they'll be able to adapt to the future. So if they get new pieces of technology, they want to plug right into this ecosystem. If they have a new device that speaks standard IIoT communication, that's going to plug right in. If they do end up with another software vendor that is providing some modeling that Ignition doesn't have built in at that point, they can just connect it up. So it's probably, I don't know, on the enterprise side, it's a lot higher. On the folks who, we have a ton of companies who are doing single location or single plant or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 plants. Those folks often aren't connecting Ignition with these open standards to anything else, but just having that foundation there helps set them up for the future.
Sure, and that makes sense, and it's also interesting because your software and your responsibility is to make sure that option is available for people. But the actual implementation of that and kind of getting these platforms and having them all work in harmony, right? That's kind of more consulting, engineering, design, integrators like us, right? There's a lot of different players that come in to do that. So maybe looking forward to the future, right? So if we're thinking about that connectivity, what's if you'll allow me to peek behind the curtain a little bit. Is there anything really exciting that you guys are working on for the Ignition platform that's on your longer term roadmap that you think is really going to be a game changer and help to facilitate the shift to more interconnected open systems in Industry 4.0?
Yeah, good question. So we have an interesting approach to when folks ask us the 5-year plan for inductive automation. What's your 5-year plan, or what's your 10-year plan, or what does that look like going into the future? We are such a feedback-driven organization that we don't want to lock ourselves into a 5-year plan or even a 3 or a 2-year plan in terms of our development. We want to be able to be responsive to customers, and that's a big part of our success, frankly, is that we take customers into account, we take requests into account, we take needs that are coming from folks who are in the industry into account in terms of what is being requested of us. And of course, we try to also we take a lot of pride inside our own innovation that we have inside as a company, but we're not setting things up where we say, 5 years from now, it's going to look like this. We do have a few things that are coming up in the short term that we have announced that we're working toward. That's going to be the next major version of Ignition. So Ignition 8.2 is going to have things that increase friendliness to version control systems. This gets a bit technical, and I know that some of the readers, some of your listeners will be technical, and some aren't. So if you're not technical, just bear with me for a second, or fast forward 30 seconds. But so we have integration with version control systems. Basically, we're taking configuration and we're moving that all to disk. And that's going to allow things like Docker rollout with containers in a way that is going to be a lot nicer for orchestrating. We are making that all friendlier For folks who are in validated environments, right now, those validated environments take some work to get things set up and fully validated, as they always do with any software package. But if you take a look at past Ignition 8.2, having a verification of basically consistency inside that application that's validated, verifying that no configuration changes have been made, that integration with version control, that movement of the configuration files to disk, makes all of that much easier and really streamlined in a way that is, especially folks who are in life sciences, they need that type of thing. Sometimes 21 CFR inside food and bev needs that type of thing. And so we're making improvements there. We're continually improving our tools inside our web application platform, or the module that it's called the Perspective module. And that is the visualization system that allows you to basically pull up a web app inside a web browser or inside on your mobile phone, and have that's where you'd have dashboards and visualization and control and all of that. That's our visualization system. So we're continuing to iterate on that, make significant improvements there, add to the components, add to the feature set that's inside there based on customer feedback. And we also have a bit of focus that is really happening around this idea of digital transformation, which is Industry 4.0 is often seen as a piece of this, right? So digital transformation is this big view of any technologies that are going to potentially help organization. And so the IIoT and the Industry 4.0 technologies feed into that whole approach. And so we're trying to help companies understand what they can do with digital transformation, where Ignition fits into the digital transformation journey, and give examples, continue to provide more resources, provide things that people can download from the Ignition Exchange, which is a free open exchange site that allows folks to share different resources, and Inductive Automation to provide and post some of our own resources there that we create, where anybody can download those as examples and demo projects and industry specific things. And we're continuing to add to the industry projects that are there. There's quite a few. I think there's about 6 or 7 there now, and we're about to add a solar one, and we're improving our water wastewater one right now. We've got the automotive one up, and a number of others. There's an oil and gas there too, and so we're going to continue improving those and providing more examples for folks to use as a jumping off point for what they're looking at doing with Ignition, and getting to where they need to go.
That's all really super exciting stuff. I really like the stuff that is on the roadmap, and appreciate that philosophy of keeping the roadmap agile and kind of getting more feedback from real users and real executives that kind of use the data and use the systems every day to help control things. I think that all sounds great. So I'll have to ask though, like, as you're having these conversations with plant managers and executives and things like that, what, beyond just Ignition and what excites them about Ignition, but like, what's the big promises in Industry 4.0 that they really latch onto and want to see realized through these projects?
It depends on who you're talking to. So at least I personally kind of look at folks in 3 different categories who we might be having conversations with. One would be C-level, executive level, a VP level, somebody who is squarely on the business side, and they may or may not have some technical expertise, but they certainly have plenty of business expertise, and outcomes are the things that are generally the most important to that group. And then you have the plant managers who are responsible for their individual plants, or the equivalent in different industries. So you're not going to have a plant manager in water, wastewater, unless you're talking about the water treatment plant, but you're going to have somebody who's responsible for a certain area, and same with oil and gas. And So someone who is about in that plant manager role where they have an area of responsibility, they're trying to improve that area of responsibility that they have. And then you have the engineers, and those engineers are going to have the a different picture of what's important. And I think that all of those pictures are significant here. The things that I think excite the executives and the folks at the C level and the folks at the VP level the most and the director level are the outcomes that we've seen a number of companies getting. So I mentioned a couple earlier where unified dashboards essentially can be a big deal. And, if you just think about a dashboard, you're like, well, a dashboard is a dashboard. But if you think about it, instead of just looking at it as the pieces on that dashboard, but looking at it as the information that somebody maybe had to, rely on reports that were being delivered at the end of the day or at the end of the week, to switching that out to having that feedback immediately, being able to see things as they change, and being able to explore that data, then it becomes something completely different. So somebody who's at that level certainly cares about some key metrics, and those key metrics can be, instead of reported at a certain time, those can be real time, and they can be monitored, they can be watched, they can be reacted to. Someone still needs to make decisions based on that information that they're getting, but that data can be presented to folks. And then, of course, data, in order to take data and get something actionable, you need to turn data into insights. And so one way to do that is to have folks taking a look at those dashboards and centralized reporting, and have a person analyzing that. Another way to do it is to have an algorithm doing that. And so machine learning is a great way to do that in certain circumstances. So machine learning definitely isn't a magic bullet that covers everything. But if you have things that are specifically around regression analysis, for example, making predictions, where is something going based on where it's been, that can be a great solution for machine learning. If you're trying to do things that are categorizing things, if you're trying to predict failures, if you're trying to make other predictions for if something's going to go into category A or category B, and based on that, you're going to change the way that your production is going. All of those things make a big difference potentially, and you can apply those types of concepts to any data that's coming in once you have an IIoT type of solution or an Industry 4.0 solution where you have all the data coming in. And I think that's what really excites people when they're at the executive CEO level, the director level there, or VP level. If you get down to the plant managers, they're caring about what their plants actually are producing. And they care a bit about what the engineers care about as well. And the engineers care about the technology. The engineers care about how quick is it going to be to get value out of this? How easy is it going to be? How reliable is it going to be? How bulletproof is it going to be? Is this going to be a technology that continues on for years? Is it going to be, open standards, or is it going to be something that goes away or that has under lock-in and keeps innovation from happening? All of that plays into the cost equation. If you're taking a look at long-term costs and the return on investment equation, and so that'll play into what the plant manager cares about, which is going to be costs, certainly, and then also increases in productivity, increases in output, increases in efficiency, and being able to avoid problems as well. So there's no one size fits all. We're across so many different industries that it's a bit difficult sometimes to pull off generalities here. And each industry certainly has its own needs and desires. But that's, in a nutshell, kind of how I'm looking at it.
Okay, yeah, that's quite a nutshell there, Kevin. But really good answer.
A large nutshell.
And I appreciate all those insights. So yeah, I know we're kind of getting close to time, but I want to make sure that I get to ask you this. You get to see so many real life applications of all of these technologies to solve real problems. what is just one of the coolest, most unique kind of cases that you've seen of ignition in Industry 4.0 being applied just in a really interesting way that you'd want to describe?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. We have a lot of big installations that are across multiple states or multiple countries, and have folks streaming data from around the world. But if I'm just thinking about a cool application, something that is exciting to me, and maybe something that wouldn't have been possible without Industry 4.0 or these technologies, the thing that immediately pops to mind is these. Basically, so there's a company called Xocean that creates these unmanned marine vehicles that are basically little ships. You could think of them almost as speedboats. They almost look like speedboats or regular size speedboats, and they have all these sensors on them. Mm-hmm. And basically, these are unmanned vehicles that are going across the ocean, collecting data, reporting it back for government entities or private businesses. And they have folks who are able to pilot these. They can pilot them completely independently from the vessel itself. So they can be doing over the horizon operations. They can really be around the world on the other side and have video streams coming back so they can see what's happening. They can pilot left or right or forward. And then they can also set it up so that they're in a bit of an autonomous mode. So I almost like to think of them as ocean Roombas. They're going around, they're doing their thing, they're pulling up and gathering data and sending that data back. And it's this whole confluence of technologies that without Industry 4.0, without cheap cellular that's also really reliable, without the right technology and the right backhaul for these things, they're using MQTT Sparkplug in this case. Without the right software, they're using Ignition, which we love our software. So in their case, it was definitely the right software for them. They went through an evaluation. Putting all these different pieces together allows for communication, allows for basically for this whole technology, this whole stack to be economical in a way that they could actually create these and use them and operate them and be successful. And last I heard from them, their fleet is growing and they're doing well. And it's been a fun example because it's not the biggest example that we have out there. It's not a project that is absolutely huge scale and it's across the entire world, but it's such an example of how you can take some of these technologies and apply them to just about anything. And you end up with something that is new and unique and interesting. And, it gets me excited.
Yeah, I can see why the idea of ocean Roombas is really cool, and to power all of that through the Ignition platform is really, really neat. So that definitely not the example I was expecting, but definitely also one I'm happy I heard. That's really, really great. So so before we close out, Kevin, there's kind of two quick questions. So we always have our previous guests kind of ask questions that they want to be answered from future guests. So I have a question from a previous guest that I'd like to pose to you. And then if you could start to brainstorm as you answer about kind of what you want to ask future guests, that's what's coming up next. So an earlier guest asked, who are the fastest growing data analytics and startups in this manufacturing and Industry 4.0 space? So if we're collecting all that data, especially in an open platform like Ignition, where are the places where you're really in platforms that you're really seeing people use to turn that data into useful information?
So I might not have a great answer for this because we don't see a ton of folks who are taking that data outside of the Ignition platform, because often the Ignition platform is a great place to do that. So, it might sound a little bit self-serving, but Ignition.
We'll take it. That's fine.
I think that, yeah, sure. Some other names that have come up a little bit, just to round out the answer here. Snowflake has been one of the companies that has grown in terms of folks asking us and in terms of conversations. We've got a little guide on our website for how to connect Ignition over to Snowflake as well. We don't have any official partnership with them. And then we do have some other companies that we do have partnerships with, or that we at least have a relationship with, that have connectivity from Ignition, and those come up from time to time. So there's the Canary, for example, that has separate small analytics platforms. Seek is somebody we've worked with for a long time, SEEQ, and they have lot more analytics there that they're doing, pattern recognition and things like that. They've got connections directly into Ignition as well. And there's certainly AWS and Azure both have a lot that's happening inside their platforms. We have partnerships with both of those companies, and they have too many services to count for each one of those different organizations. But there's a whole variety of things that people are doing inside both of those cloud platforms. And then Google Cloud is we see that sprinkled in as well from time to time. That's kind of the third player. It's not as big as the other two in terms of our customer base, but there's a little bit of that. And so, of course, we're able to connect to that as well. One of the nice things that the Google Cloud Platform has is the online, basically, TensorFlow engine that you can spin up and you can interact with. So if you didn't want to run it locally, if you needed to run it in the cloud, you can run it there.
Cool. And you know what? Two other quick notes and asides from that. One is a pretty shameless self-promotion of this podcast, where I know you mentioned Seek in there. We do have an earlier episode where we interview Michael Rissy from Seek. So we go through a lot of questions with them too. So was definitely looking forward to having them show up in your answer. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then also, we joke about Ignition being one of those answers, but, I want to make sure we don't brush that off, too. You got to use the tools that you have, right? And if you have Ignition, there is still a lot of power that you can do in that. And yeah, you can take things to some cloud-based advanced analytics and machine learning tool, but there's a lot that you can just do within that platform, too. And you want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth and really pushing those platforms to their limits as well. So I think that's a very legitimate answer. So.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'd encourage anybody who's exploring inside Ignition in terms of the analytic tools directly inside there to check out the Ignition Exchange, check out the machine learning resources that are there. It's certainly, just like any platform that has machine learning, it takes some expertise and some understandings of the algorithms, but we've got about a dozen that are built in that are all things that customers are finding value out of right now. So. And then, of course, there's most of the things that you see in terms of examples and dashboarding and case studies that we have out there are done directly inside Ignition. And so, yeah, lots of really good tools. So thanks for mentioning that, Sam.
Yeah, of course. And, pay it forward a little bit. What do you want me to be asking in a future podcast to another guest that we have? What Industry 4.0 question do you want to hear answered?
Yeah. Let's go with this. What are the biggest blind spots that folks have about Industry 4.0 right now?
I would love to ask that question, and I think we're going to get some really interesting responses to that. I certainly have a couple of mine, but I'll let the next guest take care of it. And then, you know what? One more thing real quick before we close out. Anything particularly exciting going on at Inductive? Any events or things like that you all have coming up that you want to make sure we share and our audience knows about?
Sure, yeah. So we have our annual conference that we've had for the last 10 years here. That is the thing that immediately comes to mind that I'd love to share. That is coming up. Last year, we had it virtually and we had a great turnout. Same with the year before. This year, I'm excited to say that we are doing both in person and online. So we just made the announcement. That is going to be out in Folsom, California. If you're anywhere around the world, please come out. You can sign up on our website as soon as registration opens. And that is going to be the third week in September, I believe, or the date should be on our website. And then if you're not able to make it physically in person, of course, there is the ability to attend virtually. And so since we're doing both pieces of the conference this year, we had thousands of people come over the last couple of years, and we can't have thousands of people physically in person in the venue that we're doing. So we know that there's much more interest than the amount of space. So if you're not able to come in person, if you're around the world, or if you just don't happen to get a ticket before we're sold out, please attend the virtual conference. We have tons of great content and sessions, and I'm sure that I'll be talking a little bit. I have an interest in machine learning myself, and I think that I'm going to be leading one of the machine learning workshops. So if you're interested in that more, you can join for that. And if you can come out, we'd love to see you. So we're looking forward to being back in person with all of this. And of course, we're going to be trying to take the right precautions with all of it. We're very aware of what's been happening in the world in the last couple of years, and we're going to be very trying to do everything appropriately that we can to make it as safe of an event as possible too. So, but we'd love to see you. And the Build-a-thon is back as well. So if you know what that is, you're in for a treat. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. And Sam, I'm hoping your company ends up applying because every company that's out there, everyone who's a premier integrator is able to apply to potentially be part of that. There's some challenges along the way. There's going to be a leaderboard. You can follow along with it. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm super excited for ICC. I definitely think that we will be participating or putting in a bid to work for it with the Build-a-thon. And I'm sorry if it came through on the recording, but it sounds like even my dog is excited for ICC. So yeah, clearly the event of the year. So that's awesome, Kev. Yeah, really hope to see you out there. I think that is a wrap. So thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us here on the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. Hope everybody really enjoyed that one. That was a really great conversation. So thank you all for listening as always. Be sure to follow Grantek on LinkedIn to stay up to date with everything we're doing. Subscribe to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek, wherever you get your podcasts. Email any questions, feedback, your thoughts, anything that you might want to know, info@grantek.com. And join us next time on the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. Kevin, thanks again so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Sam. It's been a pleasure being here.